Welcome to Future Foodcast. I'm Pam Line Miller, your host. Have you ever thought about when you go in the grocery store and you go shopping, the different brands that are available and how you decide between them, store brands versus name brands, etc.? We have an expert in that area with us today who's going to give us the skinny on all that. Nancy Jo Seaton is with Seaton Food Consultants. Welcome to the show, Nancy.
Hi, Pam. I'm so happy to be here and really excited to talk about everything that's going on in the consumer retail sector, especially with private label brands or what we call own brands. And there's a lot happening in that area, and it's all great news for the consumer.
Well, I can't wait to dive into that. But why don't you tell us a little bit about your consultancy and how you got started and why you got started?
Well, I actually had fantastic luck. Let me just, sometimes it's good, it's better to be lucky than good, right? But if you're both, that's when it's really happens. So I had the opportunity, my best customer said to me, I don't think we want you to work for anyone else anymore. We want you to work for us. And so the Subway restaurant system said to me in 2008, will you come help us with our post-production quality? And I said, yes. And so I started Seaton Food Consultants, entirely designed to help them. And really, we were charged with, my group and I were charged with making sure that the chicken in California tasted like the chicken in Connecticut. And over the years, that evolved into the bread in Australia tasting like the bread in Alabama, and really kind of unifying all those products and making sure they tasted the same, given differences in raw materials, nation, where things are being made, different manufacturers, and really helping the manufacturers understand what the end goal was. And so that came with creating a team of 12 highly trained sensory specialists that I trained myself. And we used good lab practices to weigh and measure, photograph, and document all the different types of products, their packaging, and how they were prepared and how they tasted over time, as soon as they were received in the store, how long you could keep them, ideal handling, all of that. And so we spent from 2008 to 2019 doing that exclusively for Subway. And then after the pandemic, Subway was like, nope, we're not doing this anymore. And I said, all right. And we pivoted straight into retail. And it has been terrific.
Well, amazing. I didn't even know that there was such a thing as a sensory specialist or that I needed one. So I didn't realize that so much went into some consistency across markets. That's really
Really important.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me what you're doing now.
So these days, Pam, we work with a lot of manufacturers who make private label brands for the retailer. So, folks who are in the cookie business or yogurt or coffee or, just millions of different producers that want to make sure that they can match or get better than what the national brands are. And then those products go to the retailer as their own private label. I also work with a lot of names brands that you find in the retail aisles, and we help them create new products. We help them improve the products that they have. I remember during the pandemic, you could not get sunflower oil, and you kind of don't realize when you say a global economy, you kind of don't understand that the folks in Peru were buying sunflower oil from the people in Ukraine who couldn't ship it anymore. And you thought, now what are we going to do? So now what oil will substitute for that at an equal price? What are the flavor implications? What are the implications for manufacture? How different are those products? And all of that. So we did an awful lot of work when supply chains were broken on how do we sub in one item for, I can't get this, what else can I do? And really the consumer now can see that flexibility that manufacturers have built into those products, because now you'll see a line item in the ingredient declaration that'll say vegetable oil, and it'll say sunflower, soybean, coconut. And they do that because they don't know which oil they're going to be able to get their hands on.
Okay. I didn't even realize that, but I do know that when I go into all different stores that have food, those private brands are everywhere. They're
Yeah,
they're in almost every store.
that's
They
right.
have the national brand, but they also have kind of
Their
that,
own.
yeah, their own.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. So you've tested a lot of products in your career.
We've tested a lot of products. My team and I literally ate our way through the entire middle aisles of the supermarket in 2022. And I mean everything: frozen, uncooked chicken parts, mac and cheese, Oreo cookies, you name it, we ate it. And really had to determine which ones of those were equal or better or not quite as good as the national brand, and what nuances amongst those products made them different from each other.
Interesting. So a
Yeah,
real analysis of that market.
that's
And,
right.
during that time as well, I mean, our buying habits are changing
Completely.
because of the pandemic. I
Yeah.
mean, so bring all this together for us. Like, how did that affect how we operate as consumers, how we grocery shop? What are you finding with those private label brands? That's like four questions in one, I realize, but I think that you're a multitasker and you can unpack that a little bit.
I can. So here's what happened. So before the pandemic, everybody mostly went to an office. So they were buying food away from home much more often. And it was about, I'm going to say, somewhere between 55 and 60% of food was eaten at home. And the other 40 to 45% was food away from home, purchased away from home, intended to be eaten away from home. Well, I read an article this morning that 86% of all the food eaten by Americans is sourced from home. That means it is sourced from the supermarket.
That's a big change.
That's a huge change that has humongous implications for the restaurant industry as a whole. And now you see, Uber and Lyft and everybody trying to deliver that food to you. But that consumer is smart. Wait a minute. I can buy a week's worth of cold cuts for what one sandwich costs me. What
Right.
am I going to do about that? Right. So that how consumers choose to spend that disposable income, which may be shrinking as cost of goods increase, has really driven them to reset their home economy to eat more at home. Now, the other thing you got to look at is grocery store prices have gone up. We all feel that. Food away from home has gone up 4 times as much,
Oh, okay.
right? And so what's playing into that? The minimum wage has gone way up. Those required minimum wages, it just in the state I live in Connecticut, double in the last 3 years. Well, if you went from paying the guy who's making your sandwich $8 an hour to 16, where's it going to come from? Part of that cost is going to come, right? Is has to come in for that. So it's not just the cost of goods. It's not just, you know, a, a, a reset supply chain. And there are new government regulations called FSMA, but it's really about traceability and the avoidance of food safety problems. And so that also adds an additional cost. So there's a lot of other costs happening for food service that are not happening in the retail side. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so that's what's really kind of causing a lot of that, driving it up. But consumers are like, well, I'm not going to pay $8 for a sandwich when I can spend $8 and make 4 sandwiches. Like eventually people are going to get that, right?
They're
And they're
starting
going
to add that up. And for our audience that isn't familiar, if you haven't been watching this show for a while, we've had some episodes about FSMA, which is the Food Safety Modernization
to,
Act
right.
here in the States and coming from our FDA. So you can look at some past episodes about that. We did do some information on it. But the whole point is that we're keeping track of where our food is coming from and going to.
That's
And
right. And because of that, it keeps consumers safer. It allows a little bit more pinpoint in the case of a recall. But the bottom line is it drives costs into the system. It's going to cost manufacturers and producers more to follow those rules.
yeah. And
Okay.
yeah, the rules
Pardon me. So
are
that's a contributor to those costs. That's part of what's
Absolutely.
driving
Yeah.
costs.
In addition to the cost of the food going up, the technology behind in the food industry is also, we're able to maybe hit a QR code on our food to see the journey of it, but that comes as at a cost as
That's
well.
right.
So
That's
that's
right.
your point there.
Yes.
How about buying habits? Because we're kind of still in the pandemic. We've
Yeah.
changed, obviously, from the 50 some odd percent to over 80% sourcing from home, and that's a lot. But in addition to that, I think a lot of us, made our food at home, but maybe we weren't going to the grocery store as much. So we kind of got those, delivery kits or the dinner, all the ingredients already together for us, and we would just make them. How's
Right.
that industry doing?
That industry is getting smaller. And
Mm.
what's happening is that there's a shift from these meal kits, right? And these meal kits, the companies bring in the products, they prepare your meal, package it, put it in a container, and give it to UPS. But by the time you get it, I don't know if you've gotten anything delivered by anyone lately, but it looks like they play soccer with it before it gets to you, right? Last I checked, when you go to the supermarket, you probably don't play soccer with the tomatoes before you bring them home. Just throwing that out there. So things are not in pristine condition when they come to you. And if they are, it's because they're so well wrapped. So there's a tremendous amount of packaging involved that's not involved when you go to the supermarket and buy it. Plus, there's a lot more gasoline, a lot more transport involved to get you a box from Baltimore if you live in California than if you just went from your house in LA to the supermarket, right? A lot less gas because that product's already at the supermarket and closer to your house. So, dollar for dollar and pound for pound, it's infinitely less costly for a person to go to the supermarket than it is to get one of these meal kits.
Right.
But guess what? The supermarkets are doing. They're making you meal kits, my friend.
They
So
are.
now you can buy something with the chicken cooked or the chicken not cooked and bring it home and cook it yourself. And the veggies are chopped or not chopped, and you can bring it home and cook it yourself, or the veggies are already chopped. And there are a lot of different levels of this fresh prepared, ready to go home, grab and go kind of theory on these meal kits in the supermarket. And what's so interesting is that you see them in the produce aisle, you see them by the meat case, you see them by the front door, you see them in refrigerated boxes in the middle of the produce aisle. Grocers are getting very creative. It's not frozen food anymore. It's food that some human being prepared for you in your town that's ready for you to eat tonight. I think part of what else is driving that 86% of food coming from home is the fact that all of these brands have spent an inordinate amount of time, money, and energy improving that store brand. So again, whether it's Kirkland, Trader Joe's, Great Value, Target, don't care. All of those folks have spent time, money, energy in improving their own brands. And it has become one of the drivers behind why people are buying more products to eat at home, because it's better priced and it's really good quality. And so the quality of private label or OWN owned brands has gone up exponentially over the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years. Those retailers are committed to their consumers, committed to bringing them value. And I'm speaking in general for all of the retailers that we visit. If you see a private label brand with somebody's name on it, that's a commitment to the consumer, and they really spend time and energy making sure that that's a good product worth the money you spend on it. And so I think consumers are really doing it. I mean, I read a statistic, it was like 54% of all brands that are purchased by consumers are now private label, and that consumers are making the decision as to where to shop based on their favorite private label brand, not national brand. So, I like the great value version of Velveeta, I'm going to go there and get that. Or I like the Target version of, a seasoned rice. I'm going to go there for that. And so now consumers are actually choosing the stores they shop at based on the private label products they want to purchase. Who would
Definitely,
have thought that was going to happen?
definitely a change in buying habits.
Hey, big one. And all greater value for the consumer because all of that is priced lower than national brand.
Yeah, you're definitely impressed with that. Well,
Right?
I'm also interested back to your initial introduction, talking about the team of experts that you personally trained in the sensory area, because I think about, you know, that's a very specialized thing to be able to taste. And you brought up supply chain, which was disrupted. So we're trying to find substitutes for that. And also with the own labels in the stores, like how do we compare those products? So, but how do you train a sensory team? Like the closest thing I think of is like the sommelier that does the wine tasting and knows about all the grapes, and that sensitive of a palate is what I'm thinking about. Is that how your team is?
So a sommelier is an incredibly highly trained individual.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that they were born that way. So just like an instrument, a guitar, a piano, the more you play it, what happens? The better you get at it. So most sommeliers train for years and years to train their palate to understand what they're tasting. And so sommeliers are very specific to the wine industry, to grapes that are fermented into that beverage. On the other hand, there are folks in the dairy industry who are incredibly trained and can almost tell you by taste, not almost, can tell you if it's a cow, a goat, or whatever the milk comes from, and if it's grass fed or not. Like there are people who taste cheese for a living. There are folks who taste coffee for a living, who taste tea for a living. And so one of my first jobs, I worked for Lipton, for Unilever. And I met the tea tasters, and they do it every day. And they try and get that blend just right so that a box of Lipton tea that's made on a Tuesday in July tastes the same as a box of Lipton tea that was blended 6 months or 6 years later. And that consistency of purpose is entirely training the palate for performance. And so really the new theory and the new science behind being able to taste, there used to be all stories about, oh, you're bitter blind and you're a super taster, and hey, that's true, but I believe that you can train just about anybody to be a sensory specialist with enough time and effort. And so do you want to train somebody to find salt? Do you want to train somebody to say, this is balanced, this is too sour, this is too sweet? Do we want to find the balance? There's guys who just eat peppers for McElhenney, right? For Tabasco, to say, yep, that's the heat that we want. So there's lots of different specialists, and it's all a matter of training. And so anyone who wants to learn more about their food, the first thing you want to do is this. Your nose is the trick to it all.
Wait, not your taste buds?
Nope.
Share about that. I'm sure our audience wants to, inquiring minds want to know, Nancy Jo.
So a great exercise really for anybody to do is plug your nose and put like a Jelly Belly or other kind of brightly flavored or intricately flavored candy in your mouth, and plug your nose. And you know what you're going to taste? You're going to taste sweet and potentially sour. So suck on that for like, I don't know, 30 seconds. Now unplug your nose and then tell me what flavor it is. And that is the difference between your 5 basic tastes, which your mouth can determine, and all the beautiful bouquet that your nose gives you.
Amazing.
And so your nose is completely intractable from really the tasting mechanism. And that's why, remember, back in the days of COVID, people said, I can't taste anything.
Yeah. I
It
do.
had nothing to do with your mouth. It had everything to do with your nose. And so they did research and discovered that the COVID virus actually disconnected something in your nose that made it harder to get that aroma in. And that's why you couldn't taste anything. But people didn't know that. And so much like when they couldn't figure out how to solve AIDS, they did all this crazy research, right? Trying to figure out why can't people taste stuff? And they're looking at the tongue and how taste is happening. And they discovered that, everybody thought the tongue kind of worked the way the lungs worked. Everybody's lungs work pretty much the same way. That's not the case. Your tongue is like your fingerprint, and everybody's works differently. And so now you have more of some receptors than others. You have less of some receptors than others. And so it really kind of explains why some people love pickles and other people are like, don't get near me with the pickles, right? It's your DNA and those receptors in your mouth. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't take those two completely different people and train them to determine a level of sour. It's just that their perception is going to be different from each other. But in their minds, you're going to teach them to define it the same way. And so that's how you train for sensory perception, for flavor, for taste perception. And then you get everybody on the same page and you say, I don't care if you think it's too salty, because your opinion doesn't matter, because what you are now is a scientific instrument and you are training that instrument. Yeah, it's fascinating science.
The consistency is the important part.
That's correct.
Well, what also about, because there's other things that go along with our food. I mean, the mouth feel and the other characteristics of our food. I mean, is that part of the sensory?
Yes, it is. All of that. All of that is part of it. What it looks like. Does it look like something I want to eat? Right? What does it feel like in my hand? What does that package sound like when I open it? Is it easy to get the package open? Is there some romance about that consumer product when I open it? Do I get this aroma that, makes me want to dive in? Or do I get some sort of off-putting aroma? And maybe I want to question whether it's good or not. So there's lots of different things that go into that consumer perception before it even gets to your nose. Have you ever seen, I think Impossible does a really nice job of non-meat meat, right? Stuff that's not meat, but it sure does look like meat. And boy, you are so excited to eat that thing till it gets about 4 inches from your face.
Oh.
And then you realize this is not what I think it is.
Okay.
And it doesn't taste like meat because it doesn't smell like meat. So the texture might be there and the visuals might be there, but then you're eating it and you're going, wait a minute, this is not actually a hamburger or a chicken nugget. It's close, but it's not the same.
Interesting, because I talk to a lot of people that are in the alternative protein space, looking for alternatives to different protein sources and maybe in addition to the plant sources that are already there. But to your point, that sensory, that nose part, how it smells is as important as how it tastes. I mean, you're going to get that before you put it in your mouth.
That's right. There's your signal.
Interesting.
There's your signal. It's going to wave the flag to you.
Well, I mean, that's kind of fun to think about how we, because eating, I mean, it's an experience.
Right.
And we socialize around eating. Like, food's very important to us as a people. There's a lot of celebrations that go on around food, as well as, sadness that goes on around food and all different kinds of events. So it's really important to us. And the food, I had no idea so much went into all of our experience. Do you have any other, I don't know, examples you might want to share with us, or fun stories over the years that you've had with different food sensory experiences with your people?
I will tell you, for your listeners, that if they want to enjoy their food more, smell it first. Purposefully take a moment, and before you put it in your mouth, inhale. And it's going to enhance the experience for you, because it's going to intensify all those flavors once you put it in your mouth. Stop while you're chewing and think to yourself, oh, am I enjoying this texture? Is this good? What's happening? Like, really start to think about the entire experience. And for me, my favorite story, I love crunchy things. So I'm all about texture. Give me something crispy, crunchy. Oh, I will follow you anywhere. So my favorite thing to tell people about crispy and crunchy and how to actually teach them about it is the next time you fly and everybody's going on vacation, maybe you're there on an airplane right now listening to us, right? Buy yourself your favorite bag of chips. Sun chips are really good, whatever you want. Open it in the store on the ground. Eat one. Roll it up and put the rest in your bag. And I want you to think about that experience, eating it on the ground, or even when you're sitting in the plane before you take off. Now wait. Wait till you hear the bong. Now you're at 10,000 feet. Wait like another 10 minutes. Once they start rolling the cart down the aisle, now you're where you're going to be, about 30,000 feet. And the pressure, the air pressure inside that airplane impacts your ears so that what's going on in your mouth is louder. Now eat the chips and see how much more fun it is because they're louder. But your perception, right, this whole sensory perception is that they're crispier. They're not actually crispier. They're just louder. And they're louder because the air pressure in the airplane is forcing your eardrum closer in, making it tighter. And so what's happening in your mouth is louder. And it's so much more fun. So always eat the chips on the plane.
Interesting. I am absolutely going to try that. I'm
You got to
flying
do it.
and I am going to take some sun chips with me. I love sun chips and I'm a Delta girl. They always have sun chips as an
Me
option.
too.
I
Me
will
too.
be, but I got to take some with me to eat some
Yeah.
before I take off
Yep.
in the airport or in the airplane and then wait until it's louder. That's
Yeah.
so interesting, Nancy.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you
It's an
for sharing
amazing
some of your
experience.
insights for
Yeah.
that. Wow.
When you're, yep, right before you take off, eat one and really think about it. And then when you're at cruising altitude, do it again. And you're not going to be able to stop eating them because like, oh, these are the greatest sun chips I ever had because you're at 30,000 feet and they're just more fun to eat.
So
Yeah,
you
it's
learned
great.
something new in addition to all the other things on Future Foodcast today.
How to make sun chips more fun.
I know. Well, we talked about all these different foods and what we might buy at the store and making things at home. But I know you and I had a conversation about recipes because, sometimes we have different sources for our recipes. And I know there's all kinds of online sources for recipes now. Used to be the good old cookbook was the resource, but there's a difference between the tested and untested recipes. And
I I yeah, I completely agree and I do have a point of view about that. And what I mean by that is this. Any professional cookbook writer, and whether that's America's Test Kitchen or, off the top of my head, Ina Garten, Jacques Pepin, whoever it is, they have professional recipe testers, whether it's the publisher or they themselves, who review that recipe and test it to make sure that the average consumer can recreate it. And that's truly the same story behind any package you buy in the supermarket. Those national brands, whether it's, Great Value or Kirkland or Nabisco or whoever, Kraft, they have tested that recipe. They are recipe testers and they make sure that they're right. So when a consumer buys a product, they're not disappointed that they actually get, what they paid for. So if you go online and you say that, I don't know, AI, a hot news, AI doesn't have a mouth and it don't have a tongue and it doesn't know what anything tastes like. Just saying. I'd rather get a restaurant recommendation from my neighbor than AI because what do they know? Anyway, so AI, that the regular part of the internet consuming world, that AI only takes what's on the internet. And if you've seen some of this stuff on the internet when it comes to just Christmas cookies, I don't want to tell you how much money I have thrown in the garbage after I've wasted 3 hours making the cookies that are inedible, don't come out right, taste like clay. What are we doing here?
yeah.
So I highly recommend that anytime you go to the internet for a recipe, which people do at least once a week, if not once a day, get it from a trusted source that has tested the recipe. Food Network, perhaps. Every recipe on their site has been tested in the Food Network kitchen, whether it's attributed to a different chef or not. It's been tested, right? America's Test Kitchen. Yeah, that's a subscription. But again, those recipes are tested ad nauseum. Anything from Ina Garten is going to be phenomenal. In fact, I saw an interview with her, and she always says before she puts a cookbook out, how many times she has people test those recipes.
Wow.
Right. So you want to make sure that when you get a recipe off the internet, it's been tested. You will be so much happier with the outcome than if you just got, Linda Lou's, I don't know, a chicken egg in a basket thing. Who is she? Did she go to the Culinary Institute of America? Does she know how to write a recipe? I don't know. So really pay attention. And yeah, it may be a great idea. And also use your brain. You've cooked things before. Does it make sense that 3 cups of sugar and 1 stick of butter is going to give you a cookie you can eat?
Right.
No, right? You've never made a cookie with 3 cups of sugar and 1 stick of butter, right? It's usually 1 and 1. So, you should have your own sense of what works and what doesn't. But yeah, I would definitely say for the average consumer, I don't really trust AI unless you can put parameters around that to make sure that any recipe offered to you has been tested, that it comes from a secure, a source that you can trust.
Exactly. A source that's credible and that has some history and that has tested the recipes is just the, good word to follow. If you're adventurous and you don't mind wasting money and time on things that might not be great at the end, have at it. Try all those influencers' recipes or whomever is on the latest the latest.
Well, back in the day, we used to get things called magazines. And I used to I had a subscription to Bon Appetit for a million years.
Yeah.
And every one of those recipes is tested. And I can't tell you how many times it was a holiday, Thanksgiving, Easter, whatever. And I would make a recipe for the first time at a Bon Appetit. And my husband or my mother would look at me and go, "Are you crazy? You've never made that before." I'm like, "Don't worry about it. Their recipes are tested. I can read English. I can follow a recipe. It'll come out fine." And every single time, perfect. Yes. Andrew Zimmern, same idea. Every single time that recipe comes, if you follow the directions, like you got to pay attention, maybe read it first before you start, and that's the other thing. Like when you follow a recipe, read it through once. Make sure it's not a head of garlic, it's a clove of garlic. Like pay attention. Mm-hmm. So, be a little bit, specific about what you're doing, but then you won't fail. Yeah.
Words of wisdom. Nancy Jo, thank you for sharing your years of experience with us and giving us some insight into what's going on out there for us as consumers so we can make some educated decisions and buy the things that we're intending to buy. Thank you so much for being with us.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, Pam.
And if you don't want to miss another episode of Future Foodcast, please subscribe. We would love for you to send us a comment. We will answer you back. And until next time, I'm Pam Line-Miller.
Thanks for listening to Future Foodcast. Future Foodcast is powered by Farm to Plate, the leading food blockchain platform. Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date with the very latest innovations in the food industry.